Holy Gospel according to John. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then, after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Well, Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble, because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble, because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we might die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there's a stench, because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. For the whole time that I've been an ordained minister, mainline denominations have been in decline. One of the grimmest predictions that I've seen is that our denomination, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, will fall from around 900,000 in worship on an average Sunday in 2017 to 16,000 in 2041. I can only imagine how the pandemic might have accelerated the rate of decline. The reasons aren't easy to figure out, and there are many voices explicating why. The most plausible to me is that our societal culture has shifted in ways that make belonging to a religious community obsolete for many. There are also a lot of misperceptions about what it means to have a faith relationship with God. Images of God haven't evolved and are often way too small. Faith is thought of as a choice rather than as a relationship that one both wrestles with and rests in. In the face of dire predictions and disastrous circumstances, we're liable to lose hope. So the reasons for our despair stretch far beyond the predicted decline of the ELCA. We're already experiencing the devastating effects of a changing climate. Wars rage on. Inflation continues to climb. Transgender rights are being curtailed. Sanitized versions of history turn us farther away from the truth of systemic racism. Women still struggle for equal rights, and our hope teeters on the brink of falling off the side of a bridge. Yes, there's a famous bridge in Myanmar, the U Bien Bridge, which crosses the Tong Ta Man Lake near the former royal capital of Amarpura. With its 3/4 of a mile span, it's the longest and oldest teakwood bridge in the world. Besides its beauty and remarkable long-lasting construction, the bridge has a notable feature. It has no side handrails. Maybe after the essential portions of the bridge were built from beams reclaimed from a former earthquake-destroyed royal palace, no suitable pieces were left to build handholds. Maybe the locals didn't deem them necessary. Whatever the case, it's a bridge that requires a lot of guts to go across. Hope is just such a construct, an essential bridge between here and there, now and tomorrow, between what is and what could be, without much to hold on to. We need metaphors and stories that can provide us the handrails to give us courage that we need to go across that bridge of hope. When the people of Israel had been conquered and exiled into Babylon, many were devoid of hope. Many had given up on God. That's when the prophet Ezekiel shared his vision of a valley full of dry bones. What a great metaphor for a people in exile teetering on the edge of hope. He's told to prophesy to the bones, and they come together, were covered with muscle and flesh, but they did not yet live. They had no breath within them. So he prophesies for the Ruah, the Spirit or breath of God to come. It came, it filled them, and they lived. Just like Paul says in Romans, it's the breath, the very breath of God that's within us that brings that Spirit. Recall the story of God even breathing life into Adam to bring that very first human to life. Again, another story of God's breath coming within. In this story, Ezekiel shares that breath brings new life. The people said that their bones were dried up and their hope was lost, and God's answer was to open their graves. This, Ezekiel's vision, is a resurrection story. And note, it's not just a resurrection of an individual, but a resurrection of a whole community. I appeal to that same breath, that Ruah of God, to come from the four winds and fill us here today. Fill us with the vision we need to be your hope-filled people in the midst of this culture of despair and religious decline. Resurrect us. Bring whatever is dead within us back to life. Then may we be like your prophet Ezekiel, calling forth the dry bones lying around in our valleys to come back together. May we be your prophets of hope to those in our world living in despair. Today, we prophesy to your breath to come and bring new life to the dry bones of all who are bewildered and dead in spirit. So Ezekiel's vision can fill us with the courage needed to cross that precarious bridge of hope that has no handrails. As we venture into these unknown mysteries, we trust that your breath is within us as we live out our answers to your question. Can these bones live? Ezekiel's vision pairs well with that long gospel story, the raising of Lazarus. We might at first see this too, this is just an individual resurrection story, but keep in mind that there was a whole community of people present. Not just Lazarus' sisters, but Jesus' disciples and those who gathered to grieve with them. Jesus even states that what he's about to do isn't for Lazarus' sake alone, but for their sake, for the sake of the crowd gathered there. And once Lazarus emerges from the grave, Jesus instructs them to participate, to unbind him and let him go. It's a communal restoration. I imagine how they all were just filled with awe. Their hope was resurrected that day. Now, there's much to wrestle with in this rather long passage, especially with recent biblical scholarship that has brought to light how one of the earliest manuscripts, Papyrus 65, where this is found, had once been altered by scribes to change the name of Mary to Martha, and in effect making one sister into two. If you're interested in some of the details, you can find them in the work of doctoral student Elizabeth Schrader on the internet. Just ask me and I'll point you there. And the thinking behind this is that the Mary in this story is none other than Mary Magdalene. And she is the one, not Martha, who makes that Christological declaration, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. Why is this important? Now, we must first learn that Magdala probably wasn't a place, but a nickname. It means tower. The only other person to make a Christological declaration in our scriptures also had a nickname, Simon Peter, the Rock. The proposed premise is that the change was made to keep Mary the tower and Peter the rock from being on equal biblical footing, to keep patriarchy in the church primary. There's a lot yet to be discerned around this text. It's not settled yet. But one of the best supporting evidence for this change comes from the writings of Tertullian in 200, who attributes that Christological declaration in John to Mary. It seems that perhaps not only Lazarus, but the text behind this story needs some resurrection. What if the equality between men and women that Jesus exhibited and practiced had been maintained throughout the 2,000-year history of the church? What if there had always been women priests and bishops? There still aren't in some places. Would there have been less war? Would we be more in tune with the relational and cosmic dimensions of our faith? Would there be more hope? We'll never know. But perhaps we can go forward with a resurrected vision of the church being founded on the Christological assertion of two disciples, Mary the Tower and Peter the Rock. They can also become our handrails on this bridge of hope. I appeal for that Spirit to come forth from the four winds this day, filling our dry bones with the breath of life. Fill us with hope. Fill us with the wisdom and courage needed in this day so that we can move into the future. You, O God, are the healer of our every ill. Exile and death happen to God's beloved people, as do deadly health pandemics, war, all manners of injustice, and climate change. We will never understand your ways, but we trust, O God, that your love is stronger than death. We trust that you are the resurrection and the life. In you and through you, our tears of sorrow will turn to joy. Today, you call us forth from our tombs of discouragement, fear, hopelessness, and despair. Like Lazarus, may we hear you call our name, and may we hear you shout, "Come out!" Today, we go forth as living answers to your question, can these dry bones live?